How's it going, everyone? It is I, Anime Outlet, and this is part 2 of What If Deku was the son of Nezu. And now, before we begin, I would just like to ask you all to please consider subscribing, as it really does help this channel out, and you can even be notified when the other parts of the series do end up coming out. I would also like to say I now have a channel Discord, a link in the description to that. And now, let's begin. Izuku, now staring at the towering sludge villain above him, would think for a moment, wondering what he could do and what strategy he could use to defeat this villain. However, soon as he would end up seeing the sludge villain crashing down on him like a tsunami, he would end up transforming down into a tiny toxic frog and jumping out of the way, as he would then end up jumping onto the side of a wall, as he would end up getting up to a higher position, as the sludge villain would start looking around, wondering where Izuku had went, as he basically just poofed out of existence. As Izuku continued on looking at the sludge villain, you would end up seeing the sludge villain's eyes, as a light bulb would go off in his head. "That's it," he would say, as he would end up jumping down towards the sludge villain, as he would end up yelling for the sludge villain to end up turning towards him. However, the sludge villain only would hear just the ribbit of a frog, as the sludge villain would turn towards it, wondering what the sound was, as the frog would then transform into a giant hawk, as Izuku would get out of his talons before slashing the sludge villain's eye, causing it to pop, as he would end up screaming in pain and agony. As he would end up falling down to the ground, the sludge would end up dissipating, as he would end up just trying to run away from Izuku, just being in immense pain. Izuku would shrug his shoulders before moving on, just not really caring about anything that went on besides that. He just didn't bother, and he was also very hungry, so he didn't want to waste any time. We now cut forward 2 weeks as we see Izuku sitting in the Class 1A classroom, as he would start to crack his knuckles, wondering what was going to happen for the day. A lot of other students that were going to be his classmates for the next 3 years would end up walking in through the door. Some of them would greet them, saying their name as Izuku would say his, as they would all just go and sit down, while others would just sit down, not even batting an eye towards him and their other classmates. Finally, after a couple of minutes, their teacher would slowly walk his way into the room. "Howdy, class. I'm your teacher, Shotaizawa. So, today we're going to be doing a little test. I want to see what all of your quirks are in combat." A blue-haired boy who introduced Izuku as Ida would end up standing up before asking, "But sir, didn't we already do this in combat during the entrance exam?" he would say. Aizawa would only look at him with a blank look before sighing once more. "Can you please quiet down? I want to see—" You didn't let me finish, actually, but I wanted to see just how well you do combat against an actual human instead of a mindless bot that was coded to do something. So now I'll give you 20 minutes to go down and put your UA uniforms on for PE. I don't care how you end up finding it, but you have to do that. And then meet me at Arena 6. It's on the opposite side of campus. So since you only have 20 minutes, I suggest you hurry up." Izuku, who had been in the school for years, would start to slowly make a stroll down towards wherever the locker rooms were, while the rest of the class would end up panicking and just hurrying around the building, wondering where the locker rooms were. They hadn't been given a map, and so they really had no idea where anything was, only knowing where Class 1A was because it was said on the entrance exam just disc that they were given, saying that they had made it in. So Izuku would slowly make his way down there, as he would end up finding the locker rooms. Well, he knew, of course, since he'd been basically living there for years. As he would end up finding the locker rooms, he would get changed into his PE uniform before he would end up walking back to where Arena 6 was. As Izuku would be sitting there, he would start to think to himself, I wonder what he meant by a combat training. Nezu said he was most likely going to do some sort of quirk thing, but not anything with combat. Oh well, I guess. He he would think to himself as the rest of his classmates would finally make it 10 minutes late after the 20-minute timer had gone off. As Aizawa would be sitting, or as he would blatantly look on towards the rest of the class before slowly muttering out, "You're late," he would say, "So, let's begin with the combat training. It's going to be all of you versus Izuku here." Some of them would say, "What? But it's all of us versus one person. There's no chance he's gonna win." Aizawa would only smile towards them before laughing. "Oh, I wouldn't think so. Actually, I'd say your chances of winning are quite close to 0%. Many of them would look on shocked at Aizawa. You can't be serious. This guy can't be that strong, can he?" As Aizawa would only look towards them before just giving a look that said, "Yeah, he's that strong." As would all just be told to step up onto the arena as Izuku would do so on the opposite side from the rest of his class. He would start to think of a strategy before he would end up realizing, well, since there's a lot of them, they're most likely going to be unorganized, along with the fact that they really haven't even spoken to each other besides a few greetings at the start of the day. So with that, Izuku could use that to his advantage and possibly just to have them mix up or start yelling at each other, causing even more of a distraction. So Aizawa would yell for the match to begin, as Bakugo, who was just grinding his teeth the entire time Aizawa was talking, would end up rushing off towards Izuku, as he would start to think to himself when Aizawa was talking about how great Izuku was, or at least in Bakugo's mind. There is no chance this pebble could be better than me. I should be the one fighting this entire class. Bakugo would think to himself before rushing off to defeat Izuku. Izuku would see Bakugo rushing at him with an angry expression on his face, as Izuku within an instant would realize that Bakugo had some sort of anger issues. As Bakugo would launch himself towards him, propelling himself like a torpedo right at Izuku, he would start to twist and contort his body to throw an explosion at Izuku. However, Izuku would only turn into a tiny little lizard before scattering across. Bakugo would look before seeing a lizard down onto the ground, but he would only go to step on it in frustration. However, all of a sudden, Izuku would then transform into a gorilla, grabbing Bakugo's leg before twirling him around in the air and throwing him right into a ton of his classmates. As Bakugo's body would slam into the classmates, they would end up falling over before some of them would start to yell at Bakugo. "What the hell, Bakugo? You just caused us all to get injured. You shouldn't have gone out there without a plan. We should have stuck together," many of them would say, some of them not saying it at all, only thinking it in their head. Izuku would rush towards them, still in his gorilla form, as Todoroki would go to freeze him. However, Izuku would slide to the left before smashing the ice with his right hand. As Izuku would look over to where the ice came from, he would end up transforming into a bird, before flying up into the air, transforming down into a bigger bird as a hawk, as he would then fly right down towards the ice user before slashing him with his wing, causing him to tumble backwards. As Izuku would do this, he would end up stopping most of his momentum before falling back down to the ground as a giant lion, slashing downwards on the young boy, as Todoroki would see this slash coming fully at him, as he would just feel an impending doom. He would try to stop it with some ice, however, Izuku's attack was far too powerful, going clean through the ice, slashing it into tiny pieces, as it would end up hitting Todoroki, sending him flying out of the arena before slamming into one of the protective walls behind them. Izuku would stare on where the rest of the class was, as Aizawa would end up stepping in before anyone could get hurt. "I've seen enough. You don't need anyone to be like Todoroki over there. So you all are dismissed for the day. You can go home. I don't really care," Aizawa would say, as Izuku would end up just walking back, as Aizawa would end up stopping him. "I thought I told you not to use your full strength, Izuku," Aizawa would say. However, Izuku would end up looking at Aizawa. "If I wasn't going to use my full strength, it'd kind of be disrespectful, you know. Just saying that they're not a worthy opponent to me," Izuku would say. Aizawa would look at the boy before just shaking his head. I'll let this slide once, alright, Izuku, but don't do it again, he would say, shaking his finger towards him. A couple of more weeks would pass with them doing some basic training exercises and some few combat training exercises against Izuku or Aizawa. As Izuku, why yes, a student, he had already gone through everything they had at least once. So, Izuku was already smarter than them with his hyper-intelligence quirk and was already stronger above them. It made some of them think they were leagues out of being heroes. Is this what all heroes are like? Well, for some of them, this would only give more motivation for them to become stronger. As all of them would end up seeing it sitting at their dorm rooms, as they would all be walking to school. Many of them would just be talking and whispering about how today was their first real hero training. Sure, they've done some other types of training, but this was going to be the real thing. It was legit. They just couldn't wait and couldn't believe it. As they would all be walking down towards the UA building, it would all walk in, going into Class 1A before sitting down. All of the sudden, though, they would start to hear stomping from down the hall. As all of the sudden, the door would smash into tiny little timbers of wood, as there stood in the doorway was a shining yellow golden figure. As they would all stare just in amazement, as there stood the number one hero, All Might. Many of them would stand up yelling, "All Might! It's the number one hero! Don't tell me you're our hero teacher, are you?" Many of them would say in just pure excitement and joy, many of them stuttering in the process just from pure excitement, as Might would end up looking on towards them before giving a laugh. "Well, I guess I am your hero teacher, huh? Well, you all can't be heroes without hero costumes, can you? So, thankfully for the support course, they all happened to design your hero costumes based on a basic understanding of what you wanted," All Might would say before smashing his hand onto a button, shattering the remote in the process. As this mechanical thing would start to come out of the wall, revealing many briefcases with all of the students' hero costumes. They would all look on in just pure amazement, rushing up to them, grabbing their hero costume, and seeing the suitcase with their name branded on it with gold. On the suitcase, that is, as they would all stare at it amazement, for Mites would tell them to go down to City C, where they had training just last week, and to get into their hero costumes in the locker room, and then go to City C, so that they can do their hero training. All of them would agree before rushing down to where the locker rooms were, as they just couldn't hold in their excitement. They couldn't wait. So, as they would all get changed, they would all meet up with All Might, as they would up just greeting him, as he would then begin to explain what they were going to be doing. Alright, class, so let's begin. Today we are going to be doing a Heroes vs. Villains assignment. There's going to be teams of 2 and exactly 2 teams. A hero team and a villain team. The villain team will be tasked to go into the building with 5 minutes and to hide a papier-mâché device supplied to by, thankfully, the support course, of course. So they're going to hide that device, and then the hero team is going to go into just the base or just the building, and are going to try to either capture both of the villains or to find the device by touching it, and that will give them the victory. The villains win by draining out a 15-minute clock or capturing both of the heroes. So let's begin with choosing the teams. And the hero team will be Izuku Midoriya and Ochako Uraraka, All Might would say, before putting his hand back down into a fishbowl and getting out another name. The villain team will be Tenya Ida and Bakugo Katsuki, would say, as the villains would end up stepping up to go hide the device, as Uraraka and Izuku would end up starting to make a plan. Izuku would tell Uraraka that she should go ahead, as he knows that Bakugo is most likely going to try to get revenge on him, since he was easily so able to defeat him from the first day of school. So he's most likely going to try to get revenge on him, so he's going to be rash and to try to push him as soon as possible. So when that happens, which will inevitably be, Uraraka should just go around the fight and go and face off against Ida. Uraraka would nod her head as the 5 minutes would end up being up, as they would then walk into the building. Izuku would look around looking for any signs of Bakugo, however there wasn't any. As soon as they got onto the second floor though, all of that started to change. As Izuku would start to see sparks flying everywhere, as all of the sudden Bakugo would explode through one of the walls before staring angrily at Izuku. Izuku would yell, "Now, Uraraka, go!" He would say as Uraraka would yes to him before rushing off, as Bakugo wouldn't even bat an eye towards her before staring off towards Izuku. "You're gonna regret messing with me, Izuku. I'm gonna teach you that you're just a fly right in my path, and I'm just gonna swat you down like the dirt you are," Bakugo said. Izuku would think to himself that it had made no sense at all, but oh well. As Bakugo would explode off towards Izuku, as Izuku would only just dodge Bakugo's attack, backhanding him in the process, causing Bakugo to end up slamming down into the ground and hitting the wall right beside him. Bakugo would end up getting up within an instant, turning his head vigorously, looking on towards Izuku. "How dare you!" he would say towards Izuku. However, Izuku would only smile towards him. "I figured out your weakness, Bakugo. Well, I've known it for quite a while. I just decided to spare you of that knowledge. Your weakness. It's your anger. You'll never become a hero with anger like that, Bakugo. You must realize that. You're gonna have to deal with civilians that are already scared enough. They don't need a villain trying to save them," Izuku would say, as Bakugo would only stare on towards Izuku before yelling that'll make him pay for saying that he was some sort of villain. Rushing off towards Izuku would send more and more explosions, however Izuku would continue on, dodging them. And just like Izuku thought, Bakugo's attacks were all over the place. They weren't coordinated. If Bakugo had a clear head and he wasn't just basing it off of anger, he would be able to coordinate his attacks so that they didn't look sloppy and all over the place. However, anger can work in some cases, allowing you to go beyond your limits and to use your fullest potential of strength because you're angry. However, with this is just a blind rage. Yes, it will make him stronger, but without any coordination, all that strength just really is useless. And so with Bakugo rushing at Izuku, with him still dodging, Izuku would end up ducking before turning into a gorilla. Holding his fist in hand, he would jump up, leaping upward, the process punching Bakugo right in the jaw, sending him flying upwards, slamming through the ceiling. As some of the drywall and just ceiling bits from the ceiling would fall down to the ground, hitting Izuku. However, he would looking back up at Bakugo, who had now just been unconscious by the punch of a gorilla, along with going right through the ceiling. So he'd end up being dangling in the ceiling. Izuku would get him out of the ceiling before tying him up, just in case if he were to wake up at all, that he would just be out of the fight entirely. Izuku would end up rushing up to the top, where he would see an injured Ida and a just unconscious Uraraka tied up. Izuku would end up looking over there, as he would end up looking around, seeing what the pillars were missing, along with that, and there was a massive hole right through the ground. Izuku would stare right at that ground before asking what had happened there, as Ida would end up saying that that hole just had appeared out of nowhere. Izuku would end up thinking for a moment before remembering that Bakugo had put his hand up right as he was about to make contact with the ceiling. Maybe he tried to use an explosion to put all of his momentum going back down. I guess it didn't work. As Izuku would see the battered Ida, would end up realizing that this fight was already over. Izuku would tell Ida that it's best just to give up. However, he couldn't let his pride and Ida to just go to waste, as he would end up jumping over the hole, rushing at Izuku. However, Izuku would end up dodging this before flying over and touching the bomb, turning back into a human within an instant. "Nice try, Ida," Izuku would say calmly, walking over and picking up Uraraka, jumping down through the hole into grabbing Bakugo. as he would then end up walking back, All Might would end up congratulating him. And that is where part 2 of What If Deku Was the Son of Nezu comes to an end. I hope you all did enjoy it, and if you did, please consider subscribing. And yeah, thank you all for watching once again, and goodbye.